Hello, nerds. Welcome to the History Nerds United podcast, episode 3. I'm your head nerd, Brendan. Thank you for being here. Very special episode today. We have on our guest, Mike Nemeth. If you haven't heard Mike's name, he is the Prankmaster General of the Army-Navy rivalry, and the annual Army-Navy football game is December 11th, so we wanted to get this content to you in a timely manner. Before we get to the interview with Mike, I want to give you a little bit of background on Army-Navy, so you have a good idea of what's going on, and then I'll also run through a couple of quick terms that Michael used that you may not understand. For those of you who don't know, the Army-Navy football game is actually a game between two colleges. They're both military academies, the United States Military Academy, which is also called Army or West Point, and the United States Naval Academy, obviously called Navy. This football game is huge for the alumni. It gets a lot of play on TV, and they're not necessarily always ranked very highly. They're not going to be playing Alabama for the national championship, but we love them anyway. Anyway, Mike does a lot of things with pranking Navy. He went to West Point. He's an extremely funny guy, and he's going to talk about how he pulls off these pranks, how he comes up with them in the first place. And he'll talk about some things that are very specific to West Point. He'll talk about center stall and spirit videos. These are just funny vignettes that are put together to kind of make fun of the other military academies, make fun of West Pointers themselves. It's just a way to have fun. And he was pretty integral in making those things huge in college. You'll hear about two specific pranks. If you don't know the name Jeff Munkin, he is the Army football coach. And I'll let Mike then tell you what he did with that. And you'll also hear the name Roger Staubach. He was a Navy quarterback way back in the day, went on to the NFL, Hall of Famer in both college and the NFL. You're going to love what Mike does with that as well. All right, so those are just the quick backgrounds, just to kind of have an understanding. You'll be able to pick everything up. If you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously extremely intelligent. So you'll be able to pick up everything else, and Mike will explain the other little nuances in case you don't know them. All right, enough of me. Let's get to Mike. Let's do this, nerds. All right, like to welcome the Prankmaster General, Mike Nemeth, to the History Nerds United podcast. Mike, how are you?
Thanks for having me, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, just a little background for the listeners, all 3 or 4 of them, if we're lucky.
Maybe half a dozen.
Listen, let's not get too crazy here, man. Come on.
This content will live forever, though.
That's true. It'll be out there.
That's what's great about it.
But we went to college together, South Hudson Institute of Technology. Some may know it as the United States Military Academy at West Point, brought to you by Nike. But graduated there from 2004.
Whole other topic.
Exactly. So I have you on here because you're a legend now, man. I don't know if you know that. You are a legend.
I still don't comprehend and understand. Like, I really don't understand it. But then I see little bits of evidence of it every once in a while when, like, friends of ours are now, like, in decent places. And they're like, oh, do you know Mike Nemeth? And they're like, how do you know? They're like, oh, he's the prank guy. I'm like, I don't know. I just do these things from my little bubble in Columbus. And now I'm seeing the impact that it has had on the Army community as a whole. It's pretty cool. I'm excited how it's turned out.
I mean, that was the thing, doing the research for even just sitting down and talking to you. Because, we've talked before, other things and things like that. But I'm like, all right, I'm going to look up the history of Army-Navy pranks. And basically every 2 to 3 articles, your name is going to come up. Like, it's there.
Kind of weird, yeah. And it's I'm excited about it. And I've learned a lot about some of the history of it. And yeah, I think you reached out to me a while ago, even when you were kind of getting this idea off the ground. So I'm excited to see it in real life now. And here we are doing an interview for your work. So congratulations to you too.
It's so weird acting like we're adults. People still think we actually grew up a little bit. I'm still not sure it happened.
I went to my friend's lieutenant colonel promotion ceremony yesterday, and just can't wrap my head around it. It's wild.
No. Because you always go back, especially when you're around people who you went, through college with, high school, anything like that. You all become 13-year-olds as soon as you get together in a room. It's just amazing how you just degenerate immediately.
Back to where you were. I agree.
So Army-Navy prank history, it goes back really far, but there's not a ton of documentation. It's more word of mouth up until now.
No, so I'm a history nerd. I really love the history of it. There's a couple other great like West Point history groups and forums, and I collect old Pointer magazines and some other like the humor side of West Point, which is phenomenal. But there's reference to them in some of the early copies that I found. However, most of it is about stealing the mascot, right? Like that is the default. Like, what are we going to do? We're going to go steal their thing, which is an Army default prank, right? It's a good one, but yeah, that by and large, that's what I've seen historically is let's go steal the mascot.
Right. And you need to innovate nowadays. It's a big word, especially in business and things like that.
Not only need to innovate, but let's acknowledge that maybe stealing animals is not an appropriate thing to do anymore. There's the cadets that stole the Air Force Falcon. There was a lot of understandably perhaps embellished, but still the headline doesn't read well. Cadets steal Falcon, and if the Falcon is injured, that's bad news, right? Was the Falcon injured? I don't know, but the likelihood that we can continue to steal animals is probably not the future of Army Navy pranks. So you're right, we have to innovate.
And maybe it was an apocryphal story because I couldn't find it actually online anywhere. But I do remember them saying that one year Army did steal Navy's goat and then spray painted it black and gold, and it died because of the spray paint.
I didn't see the die part, but I mean, it's very likely, very likely possible. I've seen some of the stories of Navy. I mean, Army mules are much more complex animal to steal. I'll give the Navy some credit for a couple of their heists of stealing the mules, but that's a dangerous thing to do, right? Like, I'm surprised no one's, to my knowledge, been physically hurt to a serious degree working on some of these pranks. So I think the future of pranks will be more sophisticated. I'm really intrigued and excited to see, some of the cyber pranks. There's been a couple of them. I've had my hand in a couple of them too, but to me, it's a really fun, cool, frontier of pranks. I do research for my pranks. Like, I've studied some of the other school rivalry pranks, and there's some really good ones out there. In particular, some of the Ivy League pranks that, some Harvard Yale ones. There's some MIT ones that are wild, like really commendable.
If you jam that many nerds into a school, it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's bound to happen. I'm talking. One of the ones was like they buried a balloon underneath the field, and then mid-game they triggered some explosion and had the balloon inflate from inside the field. And the guy who was getting interviewed for it, he's like, "We'd all be arrested, today. There's no way we could do something like that." Now. And so for your audience, and to give some context, I do have a couple rules for my pranks, and they're important rules for a lot of my projects, but it is something I want to, if there's some lessons to be shared is before we get into the details of it. I will always put my name on it. As we've discovered in our digital society, it's easy to do things anonymously. And when you're doing things anonymously, you tend to do things that you might otherwise not do. And so I always put my name on it as my own self-check of would I want my name associated with this? Now, there's plenty of times where I'm about to do the send button and I'm I don't know, but I still put my name on everything. And then I won't do anything that I wouldn't share with my mother.
Yeah, that's important.
When I was doing the Center Stall stuff back at West Point, the weekly humor articles and things like that, good friend of mine got into some trouble because his were, as one of the TAC officers put, his were the Penthouse magazine to my Playboy magazine. And I was like, it's okay to be on the edge, but let's keep it something that we can talk about, especially now that we all have families and kids and stuff like that too.
I mean, that was one of the things I was gonna, say to you, especially I was gonna ask about your rules and things like that, because you've done so many, and some of them pretty freaking big, and they're never mean-spirited. I think that's where people completely go off the rails when it comes to pranks, is you go from prank to just messing with people very easily if you cross that line even a little bit.
Yeah, that's the guy. I've come up with many ideas that have been mean-spirited, right? But that's where you can quickly filter them out. But those are the two rules that I filter them out. There's a third rule that's very selfish. I only do things that don't take up very much of my time. So if you really unpack some of the most successful pranks, for some of my pranks, 30 minutes. I'm very, very efficient with the pranks. But even back to some of the mean-spirited stuff, Army Navy is fun. I got lots of friends that are in the Navy. I've got some of my dearest friends are Naval Academy graduates, and they understand my my role in the rivalry. But they're like, there's lots of people that send me ideas and they're like, oh, you need to do something about Navy can't drive ships and boats crash and stuff like that. And I'm like, people died, right? Like that's a very sensitive topic for the Navy about safety and their operational capabilities. And if the Army had widespread helicopter crashes, I'd be pretty pissed if Navy did a prank about Army's crashing helicopters, right? Yeah. Like that's an easy way to frame it. So you're right. I don't do anything mean spirited. Sometimes I need help from my peers, and I've got a close network of people that I kind of test some ideas out with. Because I think it's fun to talk about pranks that I started exploring but never did. When that ship got captured in Iran like a few years ago, and the guys got detained for like a day or whatever, I looked into running newspaper ads in Iran. Like there was some newspaper, and I was gonna figure out some angle of like I didn't know. That was kind of the basis of it. Like, could I get a picture of an ad in a newspaper in Iran referencing somebody says "Go Army, beat Navy"? And I tested that out with a couple people, and they're like, "That's probably not a good one to do." I'm like, "All right, you're right. You're right, right? Like I'll back off that."
Well, here's the question: you never forget your first. What is your first Army Navy prank?
Here's a quick story to it. I did videos at West Point, right? And those were
unforgettable. First of all,
so those were never Army Navy pranks. Those were just cadet humor videos. By the time, and this is for listeners who are perhaps younger, there was a day before YouTube and really a day before true social media. I mean, this is 2002, almost 20 years ago. I made some videos, and for a lot of people, it was the first time they'd seen like behind the scenes stuff from inside of West Point. And I didn't know a damn thing about how to like make a video or how to compress it. And this is like as the Iraq War is launching, and I'm making these like 122 meg AVI file like videos and sending them out via email to everybody, who's then forwarding to everybody. And I know I got some really angry letters from like some Department of Defense like network administrators. They're like, compress your video files next time. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Anyway, so I made these videos, and they really had some widespread play in the Army. And classmates of senior leadership at West Point were reaching out to them, like the commandant's classmates were like, "Oh, this thing's awesome." And he's like, "What the hell is this? I didn't approve this." So first year I got rolled into, well, if Mike's going to make videos, let's have him make them for Army Navy. And that was a big thing. I mean, now you see some of the productions that they do that are like completely like supported by everybody, right? Like everybody.
It's like Hollywood.
Yeah. I mean, we were like, this ragtag like little crew and had very little support. And
I'll say it for you, and I'll explain to the listeners. The Corps has just means when you look back, everything was much harder for us, and it's much easier now. It's just our saying.
You're right, Mike. This is my Corps has for the video story. So I made some Army Navy videos my first year. They were all rejected. Like I had the scripts approved, and then I sat and I made them, and I really like wanted them to be great because Army football was in a rough state that year, and I wanted the videos to be a good morale booster. Very few people know this. I got seriously injured first semester, first year at the Marine Corps Marathon. So Marine Corps Marathon, I had a body temperature of 108. I was in like a full heat stroke, like in a coma, and they were like life flighting me out, and this like medic was like, you need to find something you need to live for. And I'm like, I'm not done with these Army Navy videos yet. So I lived for finishing them up. I lived, obviously. I go back to West Point. I finish editing them up. A couple weeks later is when like it's the review, and the commandant rejects them all. I mean, some of them were like exactly what we pitched. We even like pitched some gimmies. So he shoots them all down. I'm pretty pissed about that. Like none of them got played in the stadium or anything like that. And then from an Army career standpoint for me, I was put on like a med hold. And again, for listeners who are not, completely up to speed on, the process, you leave West Point and you're supposed to go off and be Army officer. I got put in Army purgatory and I'm commissioned as a lieutenant and then just stuck waiting and waiting. And then they just cut me loose. So I was medically separated as a lieutenant. It was not fun. Everyone else is doing their Army career and saying how lucky I am that I got out early, and I'm just pissed. I don't know what to do. I'm in New York City. I'm really angry and depressed. And I made some old grad friends there in New York City who had seen my videos from when I was a cadet. And they're like, Mike, you need to get like you don't seem like you're in a good space right now. Like you need to get back to being you. And like you should make an Army, video or something. I'm like, how? Right? Like I can't, that's weird. I don't go there anymore, right? I can't call up a bunch of cadets and make a video and I don't really have anything to contribute. But that idea did stick with me. And then I thought of the fact that I'm not there anymore. I can't really get in trouble for anything if I want to do something to contribute to the rivalry. So maybe I should do a prank. So one of the first, probably the first really effective prank, like as far as like when I really decided to say, okay, I'm going to do a good prank every year. I don't remember what year it is, but it's a while ago now. I tricked the Baltimore Sun into publishing a story that the City Council of Annapolis had enacted Go Army Day. And I put in fake quotes from the mayor about how excited he was to support real soldiers for once, and some like quotes from shopkeepers who were named like Sylvie Thayer, right? Just like there's just a bunch of like little layers to the prank, and that ruined some people's days over over in Annapolis. The mayor's office had to put out a statement that they've been pranked and that it wasn't true, and then that's what got even more coverage. Was then there was another story in the Navy Times about the prank, and that I think is the formula that works really well for a good prank is that there's a good laugh, then there's some other layer to what happens, and then there's another story afterwards about it. And that story can even have some more permanence to it because people who felt like they were in on the joke when they saw it now have something else to share that like affirms that they saw it first, right? I think that's the angle there. So that kind of laid out the framework that I try to do once a year.
And the one that I look at and I really wish that I could have reached out to you right after you did it was the Roger Staubach signed football. Or people had to sign up for it. You got their phone numbers, and then basically they couldn't get off getting texted until they said, "Go." Was it Go Army or just Beat Navy?
Just Beat Navy.
Beat Navy. So I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, this is a good prank. That's great. But I have a feeling you probably got some very rude responses from that one that day.
So I'll tell you that story because it's another angle that's important. I think important for a good prank is there should be some timeliness to the underlying subject of it, right? So with that prank in particular, a lot of the conversation at that point was about data privacy and like, people just filling out on Facebook and sharing all their private info, and it was a little bit of like fake group profiles, right? Like how easy it is to create these affinity groups and who's really behind them. So those are all the like extra layers that inspired that prank. So yeah, I created a fake Naval Academy football alumni group and quite quickly, right? Again, this goes back to like, this was not a lot of work. I created the Facebook group. I ran a couple ads that invited people who fit that demographic of Naval Academy alumni and they joined. Now I got a Facebook group. Now, within that group, I started a contest that said, hey, we're giving away a football. Fill out all your information here. In the terms and conditions, it says, I'm Mike Nemeth. I'm pranking you. Like all of it right there. That was a nobody read that at all.
Nobody does.
So then I had all their information, and I didn't even think about what I wanted to do with it yet. Like I was just like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like I'll test it out and see if it works. And it works. Now I got all these phone numbers and emails. What am I going to do with it? So I started experimenting with it. And again, this gets back to what's going to make it a good prank. I'm going to do it, and then I need to create some sort of story about it. The story about it needs good screenshots of the reactions.
Yeah.
Right. Like the prank itself is good, but now there needs to be a good story about it. And because the stories happen, every year, I've got good connections with the authors and journalists who are like, hey, what's your prank going to be this year? So that one I even teed up a little bit. I told him about the prank, and he's like, great, I'll release the article kind of closer to Army Navy when we know it'll be a good, good read. So I collected the info. I started texting them like, welcome to the Army fan club. I didn't think of the Beat Navy unsubscribe piece yet. I just want to see what their reactions were. And they just ignored it. Like I was like, damn it. Like I need more, I need a better screenshot. So the best reactions I had was when I started texting them, thanks for subscribing to your recurring donation to Army athletics. And then some of them I just said like, thanks for your $50 donation to the Army A Club. And then they're like, what is this? And I'm like, to unsubscribe, hit Beat Navy. So then I got some good screenshots. And then after that, I just let it go because it was starting to violate my rule, which is this shouldn't take too much time, right? Like I got my screenshots, I pulled off the prank. That group is still active and there's still members of it. I'm just sitting on it. Like I'll use it again sometime when I come up with another idea.
Oh yeah, people forget about it. Now I have to say, I think the most successful has to be the USS Jeff Munkin. It has to be, right?
Oh, I don't know.
So?
I think the book, the discipline book.
Oh, that's true.
It's a tough call. All right. The Jeff Munkin one. Yeah, it was cool.
I mean, I saw it. I was confused for a second, and I forgot you for a second, and I'm like, this can't be. And I'm thinking, wait, what time of year is it? Oh.
You're right. I think as with all history, this is a great relevant to history piece, because that one's more recent. You're giving it more weight. And here's why. Although there's a layer to the Jeff Munkin prank that if it does happen, I'll be pleased. I'll give you the rundown of the Jeff Munkin prank. Very easy prank. I've certainly mastered how to insert fake news into the world. And the Jeff Munkin prank that year was not my like go-to prank. It was kind of, to me, it was like a throwaway prank because it wasn't a challenge to me. I was like, I know, I can do this one. I know what'll happen. We'll see if it works. And then it worked very well. I mean, CBS was like reporting it, and then other people were reporting how awesome it is that the Navy would do that. But then that was kind of it. There wasn't any real traction. What I tried to do, and what still might be happening, it takes some time, is there's a bunch of other like naval journals and all these like market research things. I want the Jeff Munkin to get into their systems as a ship that is like scheduled for delivery, because I know that like our adversaries watch those journals to see what's happening in the Navy. And so I want to see like someday that there's some like threat analysis, right? Of like, whatever happened to the Jeff Munkin, right? Is it a secret?
Somewhere out in the Pacific, we don't know.
Yeah. Like, so yeah, that's where I'd like to see that one go. The book one, though, the reason why that one is, I would say, still my favorite.
Which let me cut you off real quick and just say, Leadership the Annapolis Way. And if you are a Naval Academy graduate or you in the Navy, turn off the podcast now and go buy it immediately. It's riveting, cover to cover. Don't listen anything more.
Just very, very, very well reviewed.
Go buy it right now. It was robbed of the Pulitzer. Turn it off, Navy people. Everybody else keep listening. Mike, go ahead.
So the history story of that prank and that book is this. I originally had an idea to do a fake Naval Academy curriculum book. And it was inspired by a ship driving, like somebody was like, you should make a book about, the Navy can't drive ships. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. But then I thought about like, what could there be a kid's book of like Navy stuff, right? And that's their curriculum book. I mocked it up. I made a kid's coloring book, and the joke just fell flat. There was no depth to it. Like it was haha funny, and then it's a whole book. And I'm like, how can I, like when I made it, I only put a couple pages of stuff in it, and then I left the rest of the pages blank because I just didn't have anything to fill it with. And I thought, like, how could I fill all these pages with other stuff? Like it doesn't work. I shelved it. I sat on that idea for a whole year. I had some surgery done that year, and I was recovering like in a hospital with nothing to do. Like there was no Wi-Fi signal, and then that's when people get creative. And so I said, man, what if it were just a blank book? Right? What if it looks like it's a really official book about like leadership in the naval, lessons from the Naval Academy, and then there's nothing. So then I mocked that one up, and I was like, okay, I got something here. Now here's the other layer to the prank. I had done some other books on Amazon, and I understood a little bit about how their algorithms work on like recommendations, and a lot of it has to do with like surging of activity, right? So if a book comes out and it's just a slow drip, they know that people really aren't that excited about it. But if there's like this big like, oh, I couldn't wait to get this book until it was out, like it can get on some lists, and then it can start to like snowball, and they start to then recommend it because they're trying to sell more books. And so then they'll start recommending it to people who matched and who purchased things similar to what it's been tagged with. So the extra layer to the prank is this. That's now the #1 most recommended book about the Naval Academy on Amazon. So anybody who ever buys anything Naval Academy related gets the automated email from Amazon. Still to this day, they get the email from Amazon that says, you might also be interested in this highly rated best-selling book about the Naval Academy. And it still sells to unsuspecting Naval Academy fans every year. So there's a review on there when you look at it that's my favorite because it's so succinct, but it tells a great story. It's I bought this book for my dad, but didn't realize it was a joke. Totally ruined Christmas. like that's it. Like you can picture that, right? Like daughter doesn't know anything and buys her dad, this book about the Naval Academy, and he opens it up and then he's like, the hell is this? It just says Beat Navy, on the inside.
So what you're saying is you wrote a timeless classic. That's what you're trying to tell the listeners.
I will say that book will have some longevity, and people ask all the time, are you going to do one for Air Force? Or are you going to do another one? I don't know. Maybe. I'll see if I can come up with some angle. But but that one still continues to function well. And then that's the kind of momentum that it can get, that you can have behind it to really firmly entrench it in there. I still know people who buy it as like retirement gifts for their Navy friends and stuff like that. So it's pretty awesome.
So now, being the successful though, does that put a lot of pressure on you every year to kind of be like, people are expecting this from me, like I got to do something?
I hate it. You're absolutely right. It's something I do not enjoy. That there is a bit of expectation, and then I really get stressed out about them, and I want them to be fun, but like there's some of them. I mean, it's like any other creative. You can look at authors or anybody else. Like you pour. This is how I was with all the videos I did too. Like you spend so much time on it. By the time you're done with it, you're like, this is dumb. I mean, that's what I thought about with the book. I was like, this is stupid. Like this is gonna be the first time I'm gonna launch a prank, and people are gonna be like, Mike, that was dumb, right? Like the hell, that wasn't funny at all. And then it works. But yeah, I have the behind the scenes stuff is I use Trello.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's like a project management geek, but I use Trello for a lot of other stuff in work and in personal life. I have a Trello board of ongoing Army Navy prank ideas. I have them mapped out I've got a couple pranks in the works that are literally, here's a prank that I want to have as like a 20-year anniversary of Center Stall prank. I have a prank in the works that is a 50-year prank.
I won't live to see that, but it sounds good.
And then I have a prank in place to happen after I die. I've got something set up. It's a rivalry version of like the guy that like arranges to have flowers sent, for years after his death kind of thing. I saw one of those stories and I was like, oh, I could do something like that for for the Army Navy pranks. I definitely think like we've talked about, like there's almost like this, you can pick like your niche and specialize in it and really own it. I'm all in on owning this niche. Like I take them as challenges, and that's what I'd say keeps me engaged by it. Is I do like to explore different ways and different mediums to do a prank. So I've got a bunch scheduled and planned out to relieve some of the pressure that I had about a year or so ago of like, it's November, I better come up with a good idea, and that's tough to do.
And along with that, there's pressure, there's expectation, which means also I'm sure people are hitting you up all the time, like, what's it going to be this year? What's it going to be this year? How do you keep it secret? Do you just say, I'm not saying anything? Or you said you have a group of people that you will talk to about it, but then for everybody else's, it's like, hey, genius at work, leave me alone.
No, I've got a decent little group of people that I bounce ideas off of. Most of the time, people don't hit me up with what is it. I'd say the harder thing is when people are like, hey, I got this idea, and they're really excited and passionate about it. And then I feel like, no, I'm not. That's a lot of work, right? Like that's what I think people don't appreciate. I'm thrilled that this has become a thing, but it really is not. Like I don't spend a lot of time on it. And so people come to me with these, like, I think they've spent more time on just like preparing the idea. And then they think that I've got like all the time in the world to like execute on it. And we're talking like all these like moving pieces and parts and let's get 20 people to, I'm like, forget it. Maybe when I'm retired, right? Like imagine the trouble I'll get into like another few decades from now when I really have a lot of time, like who knows? But for the most part, that's the challenge, is like people come to me with ideas that I can't execute on. And then I kind of feel like a jerk just telling them, no, that's a bad idea.
Now, what I'm thinking is what we really need to figure out is somehow, I don't think Navy has an equivalent of you. Like we need some sort of nemesis for you to bounce this off of.
The reporters have asked me that question. They're like, who's your rival? And I don't have an answer to that. So here's two things, and I'm there's a couple guys who've made great videos. There was a guy that Nemeth made great spirit videos, but again, the spirit video construct really can only be done well at the academies. And I don't want to step on their toes because that's something fun for them to be able to do. So I do try to stay away from making videos, because also videos are a lot of work. But there's a couple of guys in Naval Academy that make great videos, but they're not really necessarily doing pranks. And so someone's like, well, who's your rival? I'm like, I don't know. Someone should step up. I'm thinking about creating a fictional Naval Academy graduate and working in something there. Like this is how these ideas start. There's something there with just that idea of like, what if I made a fictional Naval Academy graduate, like a persona, and began the idea that like that person's a prank, but then there's a double like layer to it.
People's heads would explode. Batman is the Joker. The Joker is Batman.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Now that would take some time, right? But even then, like I'm trying to think about like what would the reveal be, and how could I sustain that without consuming up a bunch of time? An easier one that I've kind of got in the works is just simply and this goes back to like some of the like lines of like what's okay, what's not okay. I had an opportunity to book myself on like a talk show kind of thing. They wanted to interview somebody about about the Army Navy rivalry, and I thought, what if I presented myself as a Naval Academy graduate and then get on there and pretty much said like, pretty much our Army is better, right? Like just created this like uncomfortable tension of like, why is this guy saying this stuff? But there's a weird layer of like, would somebody be upset if they accused me of impersonating a Naval Academy grad. Like there's some difficulty there. Even then, like I don't want to mess with that stuff. So I did something different. One of the ideas that came offshoot of that was I wrote an op-ed as the superintendent of the Naval Academy. This was a prank a couple years ago. I wrote an op-ed as superintendent, whoever, about how this year he's rooting for Army, and it got a little bit of traction. It had some good, but it got taken down pretty quickly. So it didn't have the longevity that I wanted out of it. But yeah, I think there's some way to do that. I just don't know how to pull it off effectively yet.
I mean, how badly when these things really hit those higher levels where somebody, like the superintendent of the Naval Academy, don't you want to be in that room where they first read that and say, the hell, I didn't say that?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, listen, Mike, this has been awesome, man. Thanks for coming on and just giving us all your knowledge on the amazingness of Army Navy pranking.
Lots ahead for us to talk about. It's a good, really great topic, and happy to share.
All right, thanks, brother. We'll talk later. And that is it for episode 3. Thank you, Mike, for coming on and being generally hilarious. And thank you all for listening. Please go to the website, historynerdsunited.com. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you can find us. Make sure you're commenting, subscribing, following, whatever you can do. We appreciate all the support. We're going to be back on our regularly scheduled flow in 2 weeks when we have James Scott on the podcast, Pulitzer Prize nominee for history. Yeah, that's right. He's a big deal, and he was willing to talk to me. It's amazing, right? Until then, take it easy, nerds.